You know, most people really understand that less is more. They know that chasing more money, more things, more status, it literally is exhausting. I mean, they know it, they feel it, and yet they keep going. Not because they necessarily want to, but because they feel like they have absolutely no choice. You've got the mortgage bills, you've got the insurance, you've got hydro, food, of course. These rotating bills that just seem to be, well, for lack of better words, the trap of overhead existence. Keeping in mind this all seems relatively normal, it's just the path it seems that we have to choose. In other words, no choice, because it keeps happening. In this particular equation, it's kind of like it forces them to slowly wearing them down. When you start adding up all the mathematical equations of everything, like I say, your mortgage, your rent, and basically your overhead of everything. But what if math itself was the actual problem and you could change it? And here's what nobody really talks about completely honestly. The reason most people can't slow down isn't really laziness, and it isn't ambition. It's overhead. That mortgage or high rent bill just never seems to go away. It's a constant. It's something you got to put in your mathematical equation right off the bat every single time. Just like utilities, car payments, insurance. You always got to have that side money just in case something goes wrong with the vehicle. Tire, maintenance, batteries. There's things that you just can't avoid that keep going up. And this is the baseline cost for just existing. And we haven't even touched base on a lot of other issues of what it would cost just for existing. And this is across all the countries. Canada, US, UK, all the developing countries have these extremely high baseline costs. And it is not uncommon when your baseline cost of living is, between $4,000, $5,000, even some of them are quite higher than $6,000 a month just to stay in a place. It's no wonder you can't slow down. You don't get any rest. And quite honestly, you don't even get time to really think clearly. And when that starts to happen, it isn't just financial stress. Yes, that's the cause of it, but it's just the overwhelming of it. That high overhead creates a ceiling on where you just really cannot calm your mind. And you get that overwhelming feeling you're like only one bad paycheck or one bad month or something, breaking down from a really bad crisis. It's a kind of in the nagging background all the time. And I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, you can correct me where I'm wrong in the comments, or have you felt that way even without even thinking about it? Leave that in the comments. Let me know where you guys are sitting at. But overall, so that's what keeps people running, not because life is good, but because the exit ramp isn't visible. Now, in just a minute here, I'm going to walk through what actually happens when you're able to cut your baseline, maybe 50% or at least 60, maybe to 70%. And it's not necessarily, I'm not going to retire, not going to win the lottery, just change the math. And really, what does that do to your relationship with work, with time, and honestly, with your own nervous system? Something that's really more valuable than anything else and always overlooked and underestimated. And what the math can actually look like in this new perspective. When I started spending real time in the Philippines, I didn't necessarily go looking for cheap living. I started going looking for a slower pace, and that cost of living thing, that revealed itself. I mean, I'm carrying the same overhead pressure as everybody else in developing countries. These are all things you don't even notice when you're inside of it. When you're inside that environment, when you're on that reel of rat race reel, these are things you just don't notice. But something did shift when I changed the environment. And here's what the numbers actually look like. And I'm not talking about luxury. I'm talking about real life, comfortable, unhurried life. When I can find a comfortable rent location, up in a beautiful setting, up in the mountain, I'm getting the fresh air. I'm only a few minutes away from the tourist spots. I got all the restaurant choices. I'm not sacrificing location. In fact, I moved back to this location to get more conveniences. And when I got that location, and it's literally furnished, now it's gone up in the last couple of years here, but still just right around the $300 a month rent. And that's a fully furnished one-bedroom apartment, secure, private, beautiful fresh air. Again, like I said, furnished with internet and a pool. $300, just under. You got to imagine, good luck trying to get even in a hotel. Now, you can get a hotel for a night, but definitely not 2 nights. I mean, not necessarily with all those conveniences. That's a huge difference in price. And then I compare the food as well. And I mean, eating well. When I'm back home, every time I'm thinking about going out to eat, two things that will hit. The very first thing I got to do is I got to look at my wallet, kind of thing, and see, okay, what restaurant am I hitting? How much is this going to set me back? And there's a vast difference between that when I'm actually thinking about doing this in the Philippines. I don't necessarily have to look at my wallet first. And that's a burden that you just don't know how relieving that is, having that mindset. And I will, to some essence, say even kind of real food choices here. And what I mean by that is, you have the open market. Things are a lot more fresh, of course. But I mean, I've always used my pineapple story. I buy a pineapple in Canada. I can literally put it on the counter for 2 to 3 weeks, 2 weeks for sure. And I can still eat it. And if I buy one in the Philippines, I have to put it in the fridge. And after 3 days of even it being in the fridge, it starts to go bad. And meat and stuff like that, I can't let that sit in the fridge for a day or two. When I buy it, I got to either freeze it or cook it right away. And I'll be really honest, I actually thought at first I was getting shafted kind of stuff. I thought they were giving me the old stuff, but realistically, it's just a lot healthier. It doesn't have all the preservatives in it. So it's a much better quality of food. And I do a lot of my own cooking, and that does save a significant amount of money, of course, no matter what country you're in. And then, like I said, the food quality is much more superior, I find, I truly do. But now, even if you're talking about restaurants, there's no way I could afford the luxury of going out to the restaurants as often as I do and the variety as I do in the Philippines that I could ever consider doing back home in my country. And it's not just the atmosphere. I give you a couple prime locations. Like there's a restaurant I'll go to, like literally right on the beach. The proper clay oven for a pizza, meat lovers pizza, nice good size, fully loaded. And it's beautiful because you get to sit there, you can stay there for a while, you go snorkeling when you want, come back, you can see the turtles and all this kind of stuff, sit back at your table, you're ordering your food. I'd really leave in the comments, tell me if you can, what you'd be paying for that in your country right now, and having that kind of convenience and a good quality pizza. And my cost is about $10. Okay. I would love to hear what you guys think about that. And that's just one example. Another favorite location I'll go, and this is a bit more of that, the more higher cost, for example, right downtown Dumaguete, I'll go have my Eggs Benedict. And that'll be around the $10 mark as well, just shy of, I believe, or around that $10 mark. It's unlimited brewed coffee, good Eggs Benedict, but it's a location as well. It's right along the ocean and stuff. And again, these are the higher cost ones that I'm, referring to, which in comparison, what are you going to get back home in my country for $10? On the lower end of the scale, I can go down and have a really good quality chicken quesadilla loaded with good cheese and chicken and stuff, of course. And I'm looking at about $5 for a really good meal there. Another one I'm looking at, all you can eat rice and gravy, a good portion of meat. Again, a very good location right along the ocean. And I'm looking at around about a $5 mark on that one as well. And I could go on quite about that, quite in depth with that. Now, you're not going to find those choices of restaurants across the whole Philippines, but again, I'm just saying now, again, location where I'm going at. So I'm comparing it to one or more of the areas that I'd like to have these choices and putting that in perspective with my rent, because I have actually found rent significantly cheaper on another island that didn't offer all those particular certain restaurants and many tourist spots in comparison. But my rent there, I had a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, ocean view, covered parking, very secure. I left it for 6 months, no problem. My motorcycle parked outside. Again, my ocean view, walking distance to the beach. I was paying 5,000 pesos, about $125 Canadian a month, and a big kitchen. So putting that in perspective, right? When you have that certain, complete absence of certain Western developed countries overhead, the categories really are quite entirely different. And I'll be making more videos on really budget, and I'll break it down. I just want to give you an area, because this is a bit of a touchy subject, but it's what I mean by that is you can very easily live on $1,000 to $1,500 US and live a pretty comfortable life. Now, many people already know are going to throw this in the comments. It's impossible. I've had people tell me you need $5,000 US to live in the Philippines comfortably. I personally know people very well that have lived on $500 a month. And I'm not recommending any of this. I'm just saying these are facts that I'm quite aware of. And again, I'll be doing a real breakdown on videos if you guys are interested. Follow along, engage with me. Literally ask questions here, and I don't mind helping out. That's part of the whole reason why I enjoy doing this. But, excuse me, I would say that you start going above the 1,000. I would say comfortably for myself, I'd like to see it around the 1,300 US and up kind of thing. But I would also say you want to have a little bit extra there for emergency fund. But again, I'll be doing separate videos on that completely. But you can see the rate of the math. If I'm talking 300 Canadian for rent, you can do the math. I mean, how much more entertainment and what are you going to be doing? And then here's where the math gets a lot more interesting. If you drop your baseline down from 5,000 you needed in a developed country down to 1,500 a month, that significantly drops the pressure for a high income, or like you don't need that high income. You need a sustainable one. There's a big difference, huge difference in life quality right from there. Sustainable income versus high pressure income. That's an entire reframing of life's pressure. A person can do part-time counseling, freelance work. More importantly, work that's kind of on your schedule, or a small pension or investment income. Maybe you have a small rental property. Maybe you've done small business, or you have an online thing. Online is becoming more and more popular. It's a harder market to get into. But again, most people look at those kind of things because they look at like they have to reach a $5,000 to $6,000 a month income to replace their working income. And when you're overworked and doing many hours just to kind of keep your baseline overhead going, it's hard to find time to do anything else on the side to create an online business. So these things get washed away very easily because you're needing that kind of income. But when you can bring it down to only needing a sustainable income, of example, of 1,500, all these avenues kind of have a bit more potential to open up and look at. All the things I mentioned up above there for a list, these barely would maybe do a dent in a 5,000 minimum needing lifestyle. But suddenly, they become a lot more than enough in a sustainable income lifestyle. And you'd be surprised how well your life seems to adapt and feels a lot more rewarding and fulfilling when that bar is actually reachable. When your income really is reachable, and it's not scarcity and it's not sacrifice, it's just sufficient. And I would say a lot of people never even actually really experience. And that's another thing I'd love to hear from you guys. How do you experience that? Have you experienced that really peace of mind that yes, you're comfortable and everything's enough? You don't feel that pressure? And this doesn't necessarily mean the Philippines is about being cheap. And it's not about necessarily full retirement. But it definitely is about what happens when the pressure to earn huge money goes away. And what you do with your time. What you think about. What you have to stop being afraid of. What you're being able to experience, and just having that, I always refer to that invisible weight, you having that weight relieved and taken off the burden of just existing, just to be alive. So I just want to be really clear about something. This is not really like necessarily a retirement video. Now, it doesn't have to be reframed that way. And I'm definitely not telling you have to move to the Philippines. And I'm most certainly not pretending that lower cost of living fixes everything. But it's very potential to be in the semi-retired position this way when you haven't reframed the math on how you're living. And I'm sharing my experiences in the Philippines because I have chosen that path. I have chosen to go there after doing many analytical things with visas, how long I can stay there, the culture, the language, and then of course the cost of living there, and the foods, and the environment, and the weather. So there's many things that have made me chosen to go there. And the Philippines has now taught me what kind of lifestyle I can actually feel a lot more comfortable with. And again, I'm not saying that lower cost of living fixes everything, but it certainly opens the doors to a lot of opportunities that you otherwise really don't have the option of exploring. Hence, again, earlier when we talked about even just the online business or anything like that, when you're fully maxed out, worked out, and you're stressed, it's so hard to find the motivation to think, okay, I will try this. And it's so discouraging when you got to put in effort and you're only making a few dollars, because doesn't come close to helping out in a high-paced lifestyle that is so demanding here. I'm fully aware that people have complex lives, they have relationships, rooted into, where they are. It's very hard to just uproot and make these decisions and all this kind of stuff. So I'm not blind to those things either. But it's what I've noticed and how it's affected my life. And I do think it really matters. And quite honestly, I was in the same position. I think most people treat money as something you need to chase to get more of. And I'm completely was guilty of that myself. And I think very few people treat money as something you use strategically to buy back the thing you actually want, which of course is time, peace, the ability to think without pressure constantly chewing at the edges of your attention. It sounds like I'm dramatizing it or whatever, but in all honesty, these are things these are underlying pressure that seem to keep nagging at a person overall. And they're very easy to miss until you step outside of that. I really started noticing the difference, even though it was a really simple little thing, when I started noticing hanging out with some friends and going to some local restaurants. And I realized, you know what? I'm not having to look at the wallet. I'm not having to really budget because it's, anywhere from $5 to $10 for a great night out, having a good meal, having some laughs and sharing some stories. Whereas back home, it would have been like, $40, $50 minimum. And there's a silent kind of realization that is hard to explain until you experience it, how that anxiousness about, can you afford to do this? Because it's not about being cheap or extravagant in any direction. It's being able, can you balance this? Can you balance your money and your monthly budget? And this is why I'm always looking at, when you're going out, you think, oh, shoot, I got to put gas in the tank. I've got to do this. I got a tip. I got to, pretty much, I don't know, correct me where I'm wrong, but does not feel like every time you go out the door, you're looking at $100 pretty much more or less if you're planning any kind of activity, and now I think my expensive activities are maybe, $20, $25. That would be an expensive activity for today. That would be a meal. That would be entertainment. That would be probably a few drinks and either snorkeling or, there's a balance. There's some things cost a bit higher. If I actually want to rent an ATV for a while, okay, that's going to take up most of it. If I want to go to a really high-end restaurant and stuff, that's going to take up most of it. But my point being is it's a lot more, way more available, and when you lower your need, you lower the price of your own freedom. And this is really a very important distinction, because when I say I'm lowering my need, I'm not sacrificing, but lowering my need just to have a roof over my head, just to fill the fridge with groceries, just to heat the house, just to put insurance on the vehicle, just to fill up the car with gas, make sure the tires are proper. When you can lower that price, you really do lower your price of freedom. Not like the Philippines as a sacrifice. It's quite different. It's a quite different quality of life. Not only is the weather more fantastic, price of living is better. And you got the freshness, you got the oceans, you got the simplicity of the whole culture. You've got such a much more relaxed attitude, the better foods. And this is what really brings me down to analyzing my overhead, changing my math. Some may look at it as a sacrifice. I look at it as changing everything, changing my whole structure to see what my end result is. What is my goal? What is everybody's goal in life? It almost feels like we're living the Western premium. All that overhead you're paying in stress. You're working hard. You're paying into a system that keeps you running. You're paying into a system that keeps you on the wheel. Consumption, high-end costs, having to stay in the system, can't afford more time off, can't afford time to slow down and think. And when you're moving that fast pace and you have such a high overhead in the sense of all your mortgages or rent and your groceries and utilities, and you're running at that pace, are you actually having time to slow down and ask, are you actually getting them? Are you getting anywhere? Is it actually getting you ahead? How fast is it getting you ahead? Is it gaining? It's very difficult to see that when you're on that wheel. It truly is, until you step off of it and look from the outside in. This is huge. And it's nobody's fault. When you're stuck in that, how can you find time? How can you justify it to find time? I can't give you a number what you need to tell you to live on this is going to fix your solution. Because honestly, of course, I don't know your situation. And of course, honestly, anybody that gives you that specific number and as a guarantee, I'd be a little bit suspicious of that anyway. There's so many variables, just the age alone, different, people have different anchors and different starting points of everything in their life. But I can certainly tell you what changed for me and how I've gone about doing it. And it's not always about the dollar amounts in the spreadsheets, although I do like them so I can kind of compare. But it's really about that feeling of realizing that the income I actually need to live a real, comfortable, calm, meaningful life is really only a fraction of what I have been doing, killing myself to maintain back home. And once you see that, once the math actually shifts, something really does release inside yourself. The pressure you've been carrying so long, you forgot it was even there. And I think this is a very important thing to realize, because like I've said now many times, you don't really, when it's, I compare it to like the frog boiling water syndrome, you know, slowly turn it up and you don't really notice what's happening around in your environment, happening to yourself. And it is super easy to get caught up. And that's how this whole system is designed. Keep you busy, keep you focused on the prize keeps moving, the goalpost keeps changing, the prices increase, the income does not match the same level. You fear of stopping. You almost get to the point you fear the fact of looking elsewhere for a different choice, because you're gonna slip, and it's all this work you've put into it is gonna be for nothing. You know, having that morning coffee, going for a walk, not having really that pressure and worry. And I haven't gained anything significantly. I've just changed my math. I've changed my environment. I've changed the way I look at life, what's really important to me. And I looked at the reality. How long would I have to work at what pace, how far, what things would make sure better not go wrong, throw a monkey wrench into the whole situation. How much longer do I have to stay on this rat race? How long can I do it? How long can my body keep up? Is it worth the mental anguish and the stress and the anxiety of everything? These are things that I questioned, and thankfully so, and decided to make these shifts, drastic as they may be. But when I look back at that, I'm thinking, my gosh, why didn't I not do this so much sooner? And that's what I'm really talking about when I talk about the math. Not necessarily full retirement, it's not escape by any means, just a different equation. One where time and calm, peaceful, and presence in the moment, the ones that are on the right proper side of alignment. I mean, if that's something you were ever thinking about, or even just beginning to think about, or have an idea about, or wonder about, I really hope this helped. And I would love to hear from you. And where are you from? What area you're in, kind of thing, what, you know, and how long you've been thinking about something like this. These are things I really like to engage with as well. And I hope I see you in the next video. All right, guys, everybody take care. Thanks for joining in. I really appreciate your support and the likes and the shares and the comments. It's greatly appreciated. Thanks again, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well.